there were 3 productions going on that I remember. One was a European Western, one was a Border Patrol story with Telly Savalas. But what was fascinating was you'd come in at the end of the day, and everyone wore their costumes from the hotel to the set. So you'd be sitting in the bar with Border Patrol agents, and we're in our Catalani breeches.
Welcome to A Word on Westerns. Today we're going to meet William Russ, who you might know from Miami Vice, you might know him from Wise Guy, you might know him from Boy Meets World. We're not going to talk about those. We're going to talk about Burt Lancaster because William was in the last Western that Burt Lancaster made, Cattle, Annie and Little Britches. Give him a big hand.
Thank you, Rod. Thank you.
Glad you could join us today.
A privilege, a privilege.
I've been a fan for a long time, and I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
But let's talk about Burt Lancaster. He was an icon when you made that movie. What was it like?
Well, you know, the impression I remember, because I was so young at the time, I was 27, and I'd just come out of New York and doing a play, and Lamont Johnson had seen it and flew me out here and saw that I wasn't afraid of a horse. And I remember we had been there, as Rupert had mentioned, for about a week. And I remember sitting on a horse on the set somewhere, and they said, "Oh, and here's Burt." And I was so in awe and shock, and it was so silly. I didn't know what to do. I kind of leaned down from my horse and said, "Well, hello, Mr. Lancaster." You know, and I think about it now, and I think, oh my God, why didn't you get off the horse? Why didn't you, give the man his due? And all I could say was that I was just so in shock and awe and young and stupid.
Well, you had some great scenes with him, and there you guys were robbing banks. That must have been fun.
It was a dream come true. I mean, I grew up with Westerns, and I was so grateful to even be in one. And as Rupert has mentioned, it was such a great gang of guys, and Diane and Amanda were so alive and fresh, and Burt was such a professional and so giving that it was a joy. It was easy. It wasn't work, as I'm sure most people would say. It wasn't work.
And you were down in Mexico shooting that. Mm-hmm. You had ridden before?
I'd grown up jumping on horses and things like that, and as soon as I got a call saying, "We'd like you to come out to California and we're going to put you on a horse and do a little test," I kind of went, oh my God. And I ran over. I'm literally living on West 78th Street, and I ran over to 98th Street, and I said, I need to get on a horse in New York, and the only people I knew that rode were policemen, and there was a stable there, 4 stories up in a brownstone, and we went up, and the guy grabbed the horse and put me on it, and I said, I got to go do this test. I said, okay, and we literally rode down the ramp onto 98th Street, walked down, you know, with all the traffic. I'd driven cabs in New York, so I knew, what are you, crazy? And we went into the park and just sort of rode around. I'm going, oh my God, I'm riding a horse in New York City. And went back, and somehow I flew out here and stayed sober enough and got on a horse out at Tony Epper's ranch and was able to ride it. They put us in a costume and literally rode up and jumped off it and said, you know, now you're getting in trouble now. And they said, cut. And I went, oh, well, hope that's good enough. And fortunately it was.
Well, having Tony Epper there must have been a big assist.
Well, the Eppers were famous, and many stories that I would like to tell, but I really can't.
Well, share one with us.
Well, no, not that one. I can't. It involves ammunition and alcohol, then I really can't go there.
Well, I heard there was a lot of that on the set, though.
Oh, it was, look, we were all young. It was, you know, people forget that where we stayed actually was the El Presidente. And actually it was an old prison in Durango, and it was converted into a hotel, but it was 4-sided. And they had rooms that faced inward and rooms that faced outward. And of course I sat in a room faced inward, and I could see everything that was going on. And And again, we're in Mexico, and we worked hard, and we're usually up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and we wore our costumes. I think Kenny and I were talking about, there were 3 productions going on that I remember. One was a European Western, one was a Border Patrol story with Telly Savalas. But what was fascinating was you'd come in at the end of the day, and everyone wore their costumes from the hotel to the set. So you'd be sitting in the bar with Border Patrol agents, and we're in our Catalani breeches, and there are people speaking French and Czechoslovakian German in their cowboy and Indian outfits, Native American outfits. And it was just unbelievable, the surreality of it.
Well, what a great location, and the costumes were fabulous too.
Rita
that you all
Riggs.
had.
Rita Riggs was, you know, she was a genius, and you know, we wore, and a lot of it, you know, there weren't many costume changes because the movie takes place very quickly, but yeah, we wore those, and you know, I had pieces of those costumes for many, many years.
Did you get to pick out your own hat?
I don't remember, no, but I remember mine very well because I was from Philadelphia or Pennsylvania, and so I was actually an Easterner. So I actually had kind of a bowler hat, and we were all very spiffy.
The writing with Burt too, he did most of his own writing as well. And Buck Taylor?
Oh, well, Buck and Kenny were like, you know, they're the real deal.
It's like going to school being in that movie.
Yeah, with them and Redmond Gleason and Scott Glenn and John. We all wrote a lot, you know, some better than others.
What was Scott like? That was his early film too.
Well, Scott had just come from like 9 months on Apocalypse Now, and we just had a great time. Scott was, you know, we would hang out all the time. Scott and Redmond Gleason and Kenny and Buck Taylor and I were like inseparable. And what was fascinating was then there was Rod Steiger's gang chasing us. And it was interesting, we never actually we'd eat on opposite sides of the restaurant most of the time. We were very tribal in our own way, Steve Ford and Rod and those guys, but everyone it was just a sheer joy.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some of your other Westerns. I know you did a Young Riders.
Oh yeah, yeah.
With a bunch of young up-and-comers too, Josh Brolin and...
Well, my wife was on that show, Clare Wren, and
you played her husband in that episode.
Yeah, actually I did. Yeah, there was a thing, and I got to tell you, those people earn their money out there, Josh and all those kids who were kids at the time. And actually, interesting, my wife grew up on horses. She was actually the best rider of all of them.
Well, in the opening credits, you know, where they have it, it's in slow motion, and they're all like bouncing like this. It's so funny.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't have to do a shot like that. But yeah, it was beautiful out there in Mesquite, out in Arizona. And
so what was it like working with your wife then, too?
Oh, always a joy. Yeah. She's a wonderful, beautiful actress, and still is.
Now, that was a nice Western because it shot on location other than just on a sound stage back here.
Oh, yeah. Those guys were outside, you know, 12, 14, 15 hours a day. Beautiful place in Mesquite.
You did a Deadwood episode as well, which was shot at Melody Ranch.
Yeah.
And boy, that muddy streets, talk about great costumes.
Oh, well, David Milch and the creators of that show, Deadwood, fascinating going out there and working on that show because they would have literally 50, 60, 70 extras there in wardrobe all day long. And, you know, and also what was wonderful about that show is that you would see wonderful character actors that you'd never see in a lot of places. And David Milch would write these beautiful monologues for people that would never get a chance a lot of times. You know, being character actors, a lot of us come in and go, yeah, they went that way. You know, and the cut, okay, good, have lunch, you know. But David would write these beautiful speeches for so many wonderful actors in that show. It was a privilege.
Well, Milch, I understand, would write overnight and then hand out new sides.
Oh, David would write there in the set. I did a series with him, actually, that was about the Washington Post, actually, where I played a newspaper reporter. And David was famous for coming in and saying, no, don't, and write a speech for you. And he used to drive people on NYPD crazy. Some people didn't like that. You know, they
need a little more time.
I know, but I grew up, I always did new plays as an actor, and I was used to that, and I could get it quick and come up with an idea. So it was always a thrill to work with him.
Well, Will, or should I call you Russ, as I heard Rupert
Just don't call me late for lunch, babe. That's
all right. You're not late for lunch. You were right on time, and I sure appreciate you coming.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
My name is Rob Word, and we love bringing these programs to you. We've got a lot more scheduled coming up. We post a new one every single week, and we want you to subscribe, like, and share. Thanks for watching.